Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome again to another session of the Global Leadership School. I hope you all had a great weekend and are ready for the week ahead. We apologize for the late start that we've had today, but we'll begin right away. I can see that our guest is already here, and so we'll start right away with the invocation for the day. And I don't know if Juliana is here yet. I'm just sorry, I'm looking if Juliana is here. Okay, well, if she's not, maybe then because of the interest of time, I'll just give some reflections of things that I've been thinking about for the past few weeks on Indigenous women and Indigenous women rights and where we are right now, especially in the school. And my reflection is that we are here because of the work that many, many Indigenous women have done, and not just at the international level, but also at our national, at the local level. There's so many women who have been working hard to break so many, shall we call them glass ceilings, or to overcome so many challenges that has enabled Indigenous girls and Indigenous young women and Indigenous women also to be in spaces of leadership in their own communities, in their own countries, and to be able to also be in stages or in platforms or international platforms to be able to advocate for the rights of not just only Indigenous women, but the rights of Indigenous peoples. And so today I'm here in gratitude really for all the work that other Indigenous women have done to enable us to be in this space, to enable us to be able to learn about the different ways, the different mechanisms, the different paths that we can take in our advocacy work, how we can advocate for our own people at the local level, at the national level, regional level, and at the international level. And so even as we go through this edition of the Global Leadership School, that's perhaps one reflection I want us to carry with us, the work that other women have done, the work that we are doing to contribute towards the Indigenous people's movement, and fighting for our rights and our recognition in our own ways, in our own countries, in our own communities, to carry that with us to the end of the class, so that we know how important it is for how important the work that we are doing in our own communities, how important that work is, and how important it is for us to be empowered to continue to do that work, and for us to also keep giving to others or sharing with others the knowledge that and the experiences that we gain through some of these platforms that we have access to. And so, so I'm just grateful that we were able to be here today. I'm grateful that we have life, we have opportunity to be here, to be able to learn, to be able to unlearn many things, to be able to pick up skills that we can use for ourselves and for our communities that we represent here today. And so again, I'm just going to say thank you to everyone who's come for the class. I hope it's going to be a very, very a good class today. Please ask all the questions you need to ask. Ask for clarification if you need to ask. Give comments if you need to ask. Give comments if you need to give them. If you have experiences in anything that is going to be talked about, please also share those experiences. And I wish you a very good class. And so I'm going to introduce our guest today, who is not new to us. This is perhaps the second time that Moss has come to this sessions that we've had. We had him during the opening, and Moss has been a friend and ally, a supporter of the Global Leadership School for very many years. And we're very grateful to have him come on to talk to us about different topics. And so today we have Moss again, and Moss has had many, many years of experience in human rights at the international level, and he's currently working at the Office of the High Commissioner in Geneva, which he's going to tell us more about. And so just because, again, of the interest of time, I'm going to invite Moss to please come on the speaker and let us know what he's going to talk to us about today. And please prepare all your questions, because Moss loves questions and he will love to answer all the questions that you have about the topics that he's going to talk about. So thank you so much, Moss, for making the time to be with us today. And please welcome.
Thank you.
We look forward to hearing about what you're going to speak to us today.
Thank you, Winnie. Thank you so much, colleagues. It's a pleasure again to come back to your session. I'm honored to be a part of this leadership school. As I have mentioned during the opening, one of the most important aspect of the work that we do is providing capacity building to Indigenous peoples globally. And in my daily work, I am holding two important portfolios that are very important to all of you. I'm coordinating our Indigenous Fellowship Program, and at the same time, I'm the secretary of our UN Voluntary Fund for Indigenous Peoples, which I really hope that if you have not been a grantee of the fund, and I really hope that you will take the opportunity to look into that. I've been asked to provide two sessions with you. One is on the intersectionality aspect of human rights, so basically Indigenous people's rights in relation to women's rights, especially Indigenous women, disability, including LGBTI and other thematic issues that are important to Indigenous peoples. And then the other one is the UN Voluntary Fund for Indigenous Peoples. And I'm really happy that that you have asked me to provide inputs into those two topics, because these are topics that are very close to my heart. Before I will start my session, I actually talked to Winnie, because I have a request. I know that I've been asked to give a session today on treaty bodies and the intersectionality of human rights. And then my second installment is on the UN Voluntary Fund. But I thought that I'm going to, if you indulge me, I would like to change that for two reasons. First, I would rather want to tell you a bit more on the UN Voluntary Fund now in this session, because we have an ongoing call for application for you for the UN Voluntary Fund for Indigenous Peoples, and the deadline is already upcoming. So I would really like to seize this moment, that you will take this opportunity to really apply, because these are important meetings that are upcoming, and I will explain to you a bit more on that. And then, having said that, then the second installment of my session is on the treaty bodies and the intersectionality, and I would really like to do that as my second session. So if you don't mind me changing the modality and the direction of our session today, I would really appreciate that. Plus, I also have a bit of a tight deadline that I have to finish by 5 p.m., basically in 4 hours. And this is in relation to, of course, again, the work that we do on the fund. The fund is a voluntary fund, and we receive funding support. Basically, donors are member states at the moment. And I'm asked to submit a narrative report of how did we spend our resources last year. And so I would really appreciate if you would understand the changing of the direction of our session today. So if you don't mind, I can start with the UN Voluntary Fund. But before I do that, I'll do a quick survey. I think you can use the reaction, I think, tool here. I will ask you a series of questions, again, just to start our session, warm up. I would really like to know how many of you have heard about the existence of our UN Voluntary Fund for Indigenous Peoples. You can go to the reaction and just put, a thumb mark if you have heard it. So then I know how many of you have heard about it. Doris has heard about it. Maria, very good. Anybody else? Okay.
Rich had a hand up as well.
Richa, yes. There was a thumbs down from Johnny. Very good. So for those of you who have heard about the fund, can you tell us a bit of what you have heard about the fund? Can we start with Doris? Can you share a bit of what you have heard so far about the fund?
Hello everyone. There in the office, we have been, it has been one of the common terms that I have been hearing, and that it is a fund that Indigenous peoples can access using the guidelines that are given.
Right.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Yes. Very good, Doris. That's a very good introduction to the fund. Yes. I saw Maria, I think you raised your hand before. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and just share anything that you have heard about the fund.
Yes, I heard from one.
No.
Can you repeat that?
I didn't. In one of our sessions.
Okay, in one of your sessions, yes.
I heard in one of our sessions.
And what did you hear about the fund from your previous session? What do you recall?
It's financial support given to the Indigenous peoples.
It's a financial support indeed. Very good. Jean-Marie, you also raised your hand before? Jean-Marie Carenza?
No.
No,
No,
okay, that's fine. Now,
Johnny had a thumbs down.
The question I have to you is, how many of you have participated in any of the UN mechanisms outside of your country? Whether the Permanent Forum in New York, the UN Expert Mechanism here in Geneva, the Human Rights Council, the Universal Periodic Review, or the treaty bodies, the committees. Anyone? None of you have participated in any of the UN meetings so far? No hands. Okay, this is very good. I'm really happy that that we are training new blood who are going to take upon the work that many of us have initiated, our elders have initiated earlier on. So that's very good. The future for me is looking very, very bright because we have new blood coming in. And I'm really happy that that I'm giving you this introductory session on the voluntary fund, because the fund could actually play an important role for you to be able to do that. So please take note of that. Now, my last and third question on this quick survey is, how many of you who work for an organization, or it could be a network, that have benefited from the fund? Maybe, you know, one of your members have received already a grant from the fund. Anyone? Do you know anybody from your organization? Richard, please, can you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, one of my colleagues from previously I used to work at National Indigenous Women Federation in Nepal. She was Kamala Thapa. I think she was one of the recipients. Yeah.
Yes, I remember her.
Yeah, that's how I know about it.
Right. And can you tell us a bit of what Kamala done after her participation? Did she talk a bit about the fund to you or to your organization?
Yeah. She has shared the information among other colleagues that there's a prevalence of this kind of fund from UN to participate in different UN mechanisms for, especially for indigenous people. Yeah.
Right.
That's good. Yeah.
Indeed. Now, I'm just looking at the list of the organizations that you are representing here, and I know I've been the secretary of the fund for the past 8 years, so I know more or less some of the organizations that we have supported. I know, for example, that Chirapac from Peru, we have had members of your organization that have benefited from the fund as a grantee. I know as well that ECMIA, I think this is the Continental Network of Indigenous Women in Central America. I know that that we have members of your organization that have benefited from the fund. The Indigenous Women's Biodiversity Network, I'm familiar here because one of your member network from Panama was our recent grantee of the fund at the Permanent Forum last year. We have had grantees of the fund from AIPP and its network, the larger network in Asia. So I know I'm quite familiar with that. This is very interesting. We have colleagues who are coming, some of the organizations that you are representing. We haven't, I don't think we have received interest or application from your organization. And having said that, I would really encourage you, I would definitely like to encourage you to apply for the next call for application. And before you do that, and this is why the changes that I requested to our organizers to allow me now to do a quick presentation about the Indigenous fund to you, so that, and then afterwards, so I'm telling you now the outline and and the way I'm going to do my presentation. So I would say that within the next 10-15 minutes, I will give you an overview of the fund, including its historical development, how did the fund came out, what's the key mandates of the fund, what are the main objectives why the fund was developed. I would also try to explain to you what are the key UN meetings and processes or bodies that the fund is providing support, so that then you can align which meeting is most relevant to your organization's mandate, so you can you can already plan. I would also tell you some important internal tips in terms of the selection criteria, okay? Because we do have a very clear selection criteria, but sometimes even if you are, for example, the most qualified, for example, in thematically, it could be that you won't be selected because it could be that during the previous year of the session that you are applying, maybe somebody from your country or somebody from your own network have already received the grant. So we have to democratize. We have to ensure that the access to the grant is for everybody. Okay. So I will provide you some of those internal tips. As an Indigenous women representative, you are actually given, you are highly encouraged to apply for the fund. We give priority to Indigenous women. It has become a part of the grant selection now to ensure that Indigenous women are prioritized. So if you look at, I will provide you details, for example, of how many Indigenous women have benefited or have received the grant, for example, for last year, so you can see how we are progressing on that fund. For those of you who have not applied, in fact, since my close collaboration with FIMI, we have in fact even provided a very specific question in our application form now, where we ask, have you been a former trainee of FIMI, or a former Indigenous fellow, or a former trainee of the project Access? So these are the existing trainings for Indigenous peoples that are being provided by different institutions and organizations, wherein after you participated in those trainings, it gives us a guarantee that when you apply for the fund, that you know exactly the mandate, the work, and the objective of those specific UN mechanisms that we're providing support, so that then you can effectively and fully participate in those meetings when you are selected, meaning that that basically you know exactly what those UN mechanisms all about, and that you wouldn't need much, I would say, training, and that that exactly that you have already, let's say, provided the necessary inputs on those mechanisms. It could be, for example, if you applied for the UPR, the Universal Periodic Review mechanism, wherein every single country in the world, human rights is being reviewed by member state. Our least requirement, and it's not the least, but it's like it's imperative that when you apply, that you should have at least submitted already a UPR report of your country. So that kind of thing. So I will explain to you more on that later on. And then, of course, most important part is I would be sharing to you our ongoing call for application, so that then, in fact, all of you, after this training, what I would like you to do as an immediate action is to immediately go into the application, because one of the most important meeting that is upcoming is a climate change meeting in Bonn in Germany. And as I have mentioned to you, as a FIMI trainee and as an Indigenous woman, you are being given the priority, especially Indigenous young women. Okay, so is it fine with you, the overview of the menu that I am trying to present to you? Is it okay, or are you expecting something else? Please go ahead, unmute yourself and let me know. All right. Are we good? Do you have any question at this point, or anything you wanted to clarify before I will start? Okay, I'm going to share a PowerPoint to you, and don't worry about taking notes. I will be sharing this to you as well later on. Okay. So a bit wordy here, but I hope you can see it. I just want to highlight here that, in fact, the UN Voluntary Fund for Indigenous Peoples, when you talk about UN mechanisms, so far, what have you learned about UN mechanisms? Please go ahead. You can use your, I don't like to give lectures. As much as I would really like you to participate, and in between my my slides, I will be asking you questions, and I would really like you to react. So when you talk about UN mechanisms so far that are specific to Indigenous peoples, what mechanisms do you remember that that has been presented to you? You can use the chat. Don't be shy. Okay. Any mechanisms that you remember that are important to Indigenous peoples that needed resources, that's in French, resources for Indigenous peoples to participate? Anyone? Examples of UN bodies specific to Indigenous peoples? Maybe in your previous research, or maybe some of you have participated in Indigenous meetings in the past. I could see that Doris. Oh yeah, wow. Doris is almost summarizing the whole thing. So yes, Doris, can you please tell us some of those key letters in there for our colleagues?
For the UNPFII, the Permanent Forum for Indigenous Peoples.
Very good, yes.
Which is coming up. And then the UNCCC, which is for climate change. And then the UNCBD for biodiversity.
Fantastic. All right. So Doris has already identified at least 3 of the most important UN bodies and processes that Indigenous peoples engage. So the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues has been mentioned, taking place upcoming in April in New York. The UN Framework on Climate Change, UNFCCC. This is a body that is based in Bonn in Germany. And then you have the Convention on Biological Diversity that is in Montreal in Canada. Jean-Marie mentioned about CEDAW. Jean-Marie, tell us about CEDAW. Jean-Marie? Can you tell us a bit more? You have identified CEDAW as an important body.
Yes. CEDAW is a committee for the elimination of discrimination against women, and that includes Indigenous women.
Gracias. Jean-Marie, sí. CEDAW es uno de los...
Yes, Joneri. CEDAW is one of the conventions, and it's also a committee. That's a treaty body that happens at the international level. Thank you, Joneri.
You mentioned about UNDRIP. Tell us about UNDRIP.
It's the the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Indigenous Peoples. This helps in promotion of indigenous.
Wonderful. Right. Okay. Colleagues, just to clarify, because these are keywords that that they will always come back most of the time when you come into this kind of spaces and forums. So in the UN language, when they talk about UN mechanisms, they're talking about UN bodies, organizations, processes. Okay. The UNDRIP is not a UN body or a mechanism in itself, but the UNDRIP is a UN standard. Okay. So there's a difference between UN mechanism and UN standards. So when you talk about UN standards, standards are basically, these are the existing international instruments. Again, it's not the most friendly terms, but but these are terms that you really have to learn by heart. so that, you know, when governments or international organizations use them, so then you would know the differences. Because, you know, when you come to international meetings, you know, people, they talk really very oftenly. Is that an English word? English is not my mother tongue. So yes, very often. And sometimes for newcomers, it could be very confusing. So yes, we have UN bodies, you have mechanisms, you have UN instruments, but those are different, okay? So Maria, please take note, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is an instrument, is an international standard, meaning, in short, it's an international law, okay? It's almost like it's the document that you look at which articulates your rights as indigenous peoples, and the bodies are the institution that ensures that the declaration, that, for example, this is a declaration, the one I'm holding, to ensure that Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 on self-determination is being implemented. So the document is the standard, the body that protects and promotes this standard are the mechanisms, okay? Yes, you also have the high-level panel or forum on sustainable development. So Pema, thank you so much for also sharing that. Very good. Now, interesting, none of you have mentioned about the UN Voluntary Fund for Indigenous Peoples. You see, in fact, the UN Voluntary Fund for Indigenous Peoples is possibly one of the oldest UN mechanisms that is specific to Indigenous peoples. It's been there since 1985. So 1985, we are now in 2023. The fund is 33, what is it? I'm not very good at math. How old is that? 33? 32? Yes, 33 years old.
Almost 37 was.
Okay, it's almost 37. Yeah. You see, I told you I'm not very good at math. So 37 years old, imagine, you know, if that is an indigenous person, you would have a family already. In most cases, you would have kids. But that's precisely what the fund is all about, you know? The fund, thanks to the fund, thank you for this fund. It's actually the mechanism of the UN that sustain the presence of indigenous peoples in the UN system. You see, we have all these different mechanisms that Doris has mentioned. We have the permanent forum, you have the UN expert mechanism on the rights of indigenous people that is based in Geneva. You have the treaty bodies that Jean-Louis mentioned about CEDAW. But guess what? Can you participate easily in those meetings without resources? No. If there is one biggest challenge that we have for indigenous people, it's resources. It's resources. And thanks to this fund for the past 37 years, with the incessant presence of indigenous people since 1985, I think most of you were not born. Because of this fund, every single year, there was a visibility and presence of indigenous peoples in the UN, especially in Geneva. I should tell you, and I will tell you a bit more of the historical development later on, because, you know, when you talk about the historical development of indigenous peoples' rights in the international community, started in Geneva. Most of the mechanism that we are talking about, and I'm sure that you're going to learn later on, they're all based in Geneva. They started in Geneva. Why? Because when you look at the mandate of the UN, the structure of the UN, the human rights mandate of the UN is based in Geneva. So it's only natural that when you talk about indigenous peoples, which is a human rights, take note of that, okay? Started here in Geneva. Now, you see, for example, when the mandate was created, it was created basically to support indigenous peoples to participate in the working group on indigenous population. All right. I'm not sure if you have heard about this, but the Working Group on Indigenous Population, this is the first international UN body that is specific to Indigenous people. The first forum before the Permanent Forum, there was a Working Group on Indigenous Population. It's the first forum where Indigenous peoples from all over the world come in Geneva. It used to be the biggest forum of Indigenous people in the UN system. In the 1980s, I've heard from our elders that they used to have about 5,000 people from all over the world descending in Geneva in all its color and grandeur. Now, I should also mention that the working group, it doesn't exist anymore. So if it doesn't exist anymore, can someone guess what's the replacement of the working group? Which body replaces the working group? Anyone who can guess? Use the chat. Can you guess? So among the different mechanisms and bodies that that we were talking, the working group doesn't exist anymore. Permanent Forum? Any other guess? But Richard, is it Richard? Yeah, Richard, thank you very much. The Permanent Forum? No, it's not the Permanent Forum. It's a bit older than the Permanent Forum. Have you heard about, I'm trying to associate some of your organizations here. Have you heard about MRIP, the UN Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous People? I'll write it here, MRIP. Pema, you said yes. Tell us what you have heard about MRIP.
Hello, I'm Pema.
Yes.
So as far as I know, MRIP is like group of Indigenous people experts. That's what I know about MRIP. I'm not really sure about all the process mechanisms, but I just know that it's a group of Indigenous experts.
And what do they do, these experts?
I'm not really that sure about the actual work, but I just know Binod.
Very good.
And I know that he's in MRIP.
Right. Pema, that's your assignment. When we meet the next time, I would really like you to tell us more about MRIP. Can you do that next time? Wonderful. He said sure. So that's your first assignment from me, okay? Learn more about MRIP because MRIP is very, very important. It's one of, I would say, in Geneva, it's our key main mechanism that are specific to Indigenous peoples. And MRIP is the new working group, okay? Of course, there are certain differences between the old working group and the new, but I should tell you that the most important aspect or result of the working group is, in fact, the elaboration of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. You see, these mechanisms, my friends, are very important. Without the working group, we don't have the declaration. And that is why Indigenous participation in the UN is central, it's key, it's important. So that when you are given the opportunity to participate in UN meeting, take note, you're not going on holidays in Geneva or New York. You have a very important role to play, okay? So the working group have helped because it's the biggest forum, and the working group was asked to elaborate the declaration. And from the working group, they created another sub-body. They call it the open-ended working group on the draft declaration. This is what the UN does. When they want specific group to be highlighted, they would create a mechanism so that this specific group could go there and participate. And then they are asked to come up with a result. And one of the most important results of the working group is the creation of the open-ended working group to write the declaration. And then, of course, in 2007, the UN declaration was adopted. All right. Is it clear? I was just giving you a bit of a history so that then, when people ask, about this kind of thing, it's important to know our history. Now, this is an overview, basically, of the expansion of the mandate of the fund. All right. So you can take a photo of this because these are the mandates or the bodies where you can apply for funding to participate in the sessions of these bodies. Okay. So 1985 is the working group. It doesn't exist anymore. Okay. The intersessional working group to draft the declaration, it doesn't exist anymore. It ended in 1995, the work, because in and then in 1998, that was the permanent forum. All right. There was an intersessional working group. You see, all these bodies, thanks to the fund, they were supported every single process of the UN on indigenous issues. Our indigenous fund was there. So in 2002, when the permanent forum on indigenous issues in New York was created, the fund started to provide support for indigenous people to participate at the forum. 2008, this is the Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, EMRIP. Since 2012, the fund is now providing support to the whole human rights treaty bodies. Next question to you. You already answered one of them before. Can you, in your studies or research or prior reading, can you tell us any UN treaty bodies that you remember? So one example is CEDAW. Do you remember any other body that is related to the treaty bodies? I was supposed to give you 2 today. So if you remember the title of that session, you should be able to provide at least 2 answers, okay? Can you remind us again what examples of these treaty bodies that you can apply for funding? So I already mentioned CEDAW is one of them. I'll put that in our chat. Okay, so yes, CEDAW is the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. What is the committee that looks after rights of the child? Maybe that's a better way of asking. Anybody who is who remembers that? So if women, indigenous women, have CEDAW, oh, Regina, you mentioned about CERD. Tell us about CERD. What does CERD means?
The Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination.
Yeah, very good. Wonderful. Excellent. Yes, so CERD is one of them, okay? So CEDAW, CERD. Anybody, anything else that you can remember? This is also your chance to use Google, okay? CRC, yes, very good. So CRC, we get it. Doris, can you tell us more about CRC?
Sorry, but it was one of our discussions before. It's it's the Convention on the Rights of the Child, of the child, wherein anybody who is below 18 years old is considered a child.
Right. Wonderful. Very good. Yes. And most importantly, this is the Convention on the Rights of the Child. They also have a very specific provision on indigenous children, okay? That they should be taken into account when they're looking at the specific situation of indigenous children. So you have the Convention on the Rights of the Child, again, the document. And what do you call the body that monitors the convention? It's called what? Regina, I think you know the answer. It's also called CRC. But what does it mean, CRC, now, here, in this context? When you talk about the body or the mechanism. That's why from the beginning, you know, I was trying to clarify the differences between the body, the mechanism, and the standard, because it could be very confusing because of this, precisely of this. Regina?
Sorry, can
You have the
repeat
same?
the question?
Yes. My question is, so Doris has already mentioned CRC, but she mentioned about the convention. I was wondering if you have the same answer, because you also answered CRC.
The Committee on the Right of the Child.
Fantastic. There you go. Now, my question to you is, what's the difference between CRC, the convention, and the CRC, the committee?
The committee is the body of 18 of the experts that monitor implementation of the convention.
Oh, wonderful. Now we have an Indigenous expert in the house. Wonderful. Thank you, Regina. Indeed. So Regina just mentioned that, like CERD, which is the committee that monitors the implementation of the convention, that is also called CERD, you have also CEDAW that monitors the implementation, or maybe non-implementation. Take note of that, huh? Because many of these conventions are not implemented. So we're not just talking about the implementation. We should be talking of the non-implementation as well. So you have CEDAW, you have CERD, you have CRC. Okay. What else? Any other treaty bodies that you remember? Those of you who are working, I know that, let me see. Our friend Pema from Nepal. The name of your organization, I know that you're coming from the National Indigenous Disabled Women Association of Nepal.
Yes.
There is a very important convention that you should be working very closely. Do you remember which one?
Yes, Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
Yeah, wonderful. Can you put that in our chat, please, so that our other colleagues could see that, because that's very important, yeah? CRPD, the Convention on People with Disabilities. Any other convention that you remember? There is also a convention, it's called the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Do you remember what's the body that monitors? And this is much more complicated now, confusing, I would even say. Yeah. Risha, you mentioned about CBD, yes, but the difference now here is we're talking about, yes. You see, when we talk about UN mechanisms, there are two groups of mechanism, okay? One group is called the treaty bodies. The second group, it's called, I forgot the term. The treaty bodies and the UN, yes, sorry. Because I was thinking another thing. Your Uncle Morse is getting old. There are two types of bodies when you talk about human rights bodies in the UN, and please take note of this because this is very important, okay? The first part is the treaty bodies. There are 10 treaty bodies, human rights treaty bodies. The one that we are talking now, CERD, CRC, CEDAW, CRPD, these are called the UN Charter, the UN treaty base, because they're based on a very specific human rights treaty. One side. And the other side, you have what we call the charter-based bodies. The charter-based, there are bodies that are based on the UN Charter. The UN Charter is the constitution of the UN. Like your constitution in your countries, it talks about the objectives of the UN. And of course, there are three main objectives of the UN: promote human rights, promote international security and peace, and promote international cooperation and development. Now, I would repeat, there are two types of bodies, human rights bodies in the UN. One is treaty-based because it's based on a very specific treaty or convention. The other one is charter-based because it's based on a specific instrument, which is the UN Charter. It's the UN Constitution, all right? Meaning that when it comes to obligation or membership, once your country is a member of the UN, immediately, as a citizen of your country, you have access to the charter-based bodies. Okay? You can use them. On the other hand, the treaty-based bodies, because they were created through a very specific international treaty, that's what they call treaty or convention. For you to use them, your country have to become a signatory, or they need to ratify that specific treaty for you to use it. Is it clear for you now? I don't know if you have gone, if somebody have explained this to you already. I was wondering, I was wondering if you have given like an introduction to international law to our trainees. Did you have a session on that?
No, not international law on its entirety, but we've had sessions on the permanent forum.
Okay.
And some mention of some of the treaty bodies actually, like Sad was mentioned, but not international law.
Right. You see, have you had a session already on treaty bodies? Not yet.
No.
Okay. Then in this case, I will include that in my session next time. This is very good because I can tell you it's very difficult for indigenous peoples to if we don't have a background, at least you should have an introduction to international law. Because for example, now here I am talking about an international treaty, but I don't even know if you understand what is a treaty, you see, or what is a convention. So it's important for you to have that background. But don't worry, remind me. That's my assignment. So now I have my own assignment. I give my assignment to myself, but remind me, I might forget. So during my next session, please ask Morse, please can you give us a bit of an introductory session about international law before we dive into the different treaty bodies, yeah? So that's good. So very good, you have identified some of the treaty bodies that the fund is providing support. Just to complete that, okay? So we have CEDAW, take note, on women. We have CRC for children, person with disabilities. We have CRPD. Now, for those of you who are working on issues related to indigenous rights and civil and political rights, there is a body that is called Human Rights Committee. Now, in your trainings or in other sessions, there might be people who are going to tell you about the human rights under HRC. Now, there are two things here. And this is confusing for many because the fund is also providing support. Well, the fund is providing support to both of them, okay? But it's important for you to understand because if you see just those letters, it might confuse you and you might apply to wrong meetings. So one of the HRC is the Human Rights Committee. It's one of the treaty bodies. The Human Rights Committee monitors the implementation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, okay? In short. So your right to participate in decision-making, your right to participate in election, your right to life, your right to self-determination, your right to all your rights and civil and political rights, they are protected under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And the body that monitors that right, it's the Human Rights Committee. Now I will put it here, Human Rights Committee. Okay. Now the other body where you can apply as well, because it's funded by the fund, it's called the Human Rights Council. Is there anybody here who have heard about the Human Rights Council? Anyone? Or maybe one of you could do a quick Google and look for Human Rights Council. What is the Human Rights Council? What do they do? Anyone? Anyone who is brave enough to tell us about the Human Rights Council in your research? I'm going to make a trick. I would like to hear from Herma Rotuno. She's a Pokot from Kenya. Herma? Oh, somebody put in the notes. Wait a minute, let me check. Oh, Pema is very, very fast. So Pema, can you read what you put in our chat?
Yes, sure.
Please.
So the Human Rights Council replaced the Commission on Human Rights in 2006, and
Yes.
it's an intergovernmental body within the United Nations system, which is made up of 7 states responsible for the protection and promotion of human rights around the globe.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Pema. That's the best summary there. Okay. Now, the difference between the two HRC, okay, and again, that's why it's important for you to understand the distinction between charter-based and treaty-based. The treaty-based bodies, the individuals who comprises the committee, the group of individuals, take note, these individuals are serving as independent experts. What do you understand by that? If you are an independent expert in the UN, what does it mean? Anyone? Can anyone guess? What does it implies when you are an independent expert with the UN?
I think, hello, do you hear me?
Yes, please, Siham, yes.
Yeah, I think he's working in a human rights committee. Does this related?
Yes,
because
yes,
he's an
it's
expert,
related,
so he's
yeah.
in the committee.
But what does it mean when you are an independent expert? What does it implies? For example,
Does that mean he or she can like have say in like all the other mechanisms of UN, like he's not responsible for a single part? Am I clear? Like, I mean,
yes.
if someone is an expert of CEDAW committee, then he or she is liable for only that committee, but maybe an independent expert can monitor or can have say in all the other processes, all the other mechanisms of UN. Just my guess. I'm not sure.
Yes, that's you're very close to that. Okay. Now, things that you need to, there are fundamental and basic things that you need to understand when you do this kind of work, advocacy work at the UN level. The first thing that you need to understand is the United Nations is an intergovernmental body. It's an intergovernmental body. And what do you understand by an intergovernmental body? Jonery? Or Juliana Upun. What do you understand when the word intergovernmental body is being discussed? Anybody?
I think it consists of the nations, like few states of government. So it's from
very good.
one
Yes.
country and another country.
Exactly. So when you talk about the UN as an institution, as an organization, is comprising of different governments. That's why it's called intergovernment. So it doesn't comprise of individuals, my friend. It means it comprises of governments. Do you know how many member states the UN at the moment has? Can you guess? Anima, yes, you're right. It means government representation from different, yes. And indeed, there are 193 member states at the moment, okay? So that when you look at issues related to the difference between the treaty bodies and the Human Rights Council, the Human Rights Council is an intergovernmental body. It means that the people who are sitting, the 47 members, are government representative. The difference between the Human Rights Council and the Human Rights Committee, the Human Rights Committee, the members are independent experts, meaning they don't represent their governments or they don't represent their countries. They are a member of that committee in their own personal account. You get it? So maybe in the future, some of you will become either a diplomat or an independent expert, okay? So if you are a government diplomat, you will participate and you will become a part of the Human Rights Council. As opposed to when you become, for example, an Indigenous women expert, become a professor, you have built a strong understanding of Indigenous or women's rights issues in general, you become a member of CEDAW, you are in CEDAW because of your personal expertise, because of your own expertise, and not because you are representing your government. So take note of that, okay? And what does it mean in general? Meaning that when you participate, when you observe the discussion of the Human Rights Council, because they are all government representative, it is very politicized. Politics play the most important role. As opposed to when you become an independent expert of any of the treaty bodies, your work is really to look at the situation or violations of human rights on a specific country using that specific treaty that you are mandated to monitor. So for example, if I am elected as a member of the Committee on the Rights of the Child, my job is to look at the situation of the rights of the child in a given country, where this international treaty is applicable. Now, the difference, again, the two difference between the two, charter-based, example, Human Rights Council, as opposed to treaty-based, like the Human Rights Committee. In the Human Rights Committee, your country have to ratify that international treaty for you to use it. Have you heard the word ratify, ratification? I'll put it in the chat. These are keywords that you need to understand by heart. Because if you want to become a serious human rights or indigenous rights advocate, you need to know the difference between whether your country have ratified CEDAW or not. In the Human Rights Council, you don't need to ratify anything. Okay? Why? Pema, can you tell me why you don't have to ratify anything to participate in the Human Rights Council? I'm just coming back to just to ensure that you understand it. Okay?
I don't know,
Pema,
maybe because we are already the member states of UN.
Yes, indeed. Because Pema, you're coming from India, no? Or Nepal, I can't remember now.
Nepal.
Nepal,
Nepal.
yes. So the fact that Nepal, your country, Nepal is a member of the UN, your government automatically have the right to participate in the Human Rights Council. Now, for you as an individual, for you to use the mechanism, the treaty bodies, your first assignment is to check whether your country have ratified CEDAW, for example. Are you aware? Do you know if your country have ratified CEDAW?
Yes, we have.
You did. Wonderful. Okay, very good. I'll get back to that. Let's move on. So we are providing support. We have provided support to the World Conference that took place in, wow, that was a long time ago, 2014, if I'm not mistaken. There you go. We provide support to the consultation and enhanced participation of indigenous peoples. I don't know if you have heard about this. And most recently, the fund, Indigenous Fund, is now providing support to the UN Forum on Business and Human Rights and to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change that Doris has mentioned earlier on, okay? The UN Forum on Business and Human Rights, I should add, is now the biggest UN forum on human rights in Geneva. You will be surprised. Before, it used to be the UN Working Group on Indigenous Population. Now, it's the UN Forum on Business and Human Rights. Why? Because now private companies are talking about human rights. Private companies are also now coming to Geneva and talk about human rights. But why do indigenous people need to be aware about this? Can someone guess why you need to be in that meeting room when private companies are talking about human rights? Anyone? I haven't heard from Medalit Rivera. Medalit, es que estás con nosotros. Why it's important for indigenous peoples to participate at the Forum on Business and Human Rights. Medalit. Si no, voy a llamar Citlali Chino, de México. Citlali, ¿estás con nosotros? ¿Puedes compartir su propia reflexión sobre el tema?
Would you like to try to share your own reflection on this subject? The subject, why is it necessary for indigenous peoples to participate in the session on human rights and businesses?
Es que tenemos a alguien de América Latina que puedes explicar un poco más.
Do we have anyone from Latin America who can talk a little bit about this? their own reflection?
No? Sí, Pema, venga. Yes, Pema, please.
Yes, because with increasing globalization and increasing industrialization, a lot of impacts have been to the indigenous lands and territories. And because for most of the business persons and industrial persons, their perspective of human rights come from the narratives of profit and commercialization. But in terms of human rights, it's not that. For us, it's about freedom. It's about having rights to our land. It's about having rights to our resources. And to ensure that in those discussions, the ideas or the new innovations of business persons and businesses doesn't affect our traditional cultural practices or our cultural rights, I think it's important that indigenous peoples are in that spaces.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Pema, for articulating that. Anima, please.
I think I would agree with what Pema have mentioned. Taking the example, I'm from India, Tripura, the northeast part. So over here also there is a lot of things that is happening only within the government, but the local people are not asked. When we talk about mining or I think our natural resources being used. So I think we as an indigenous have to represent our own voice rather than someone else representing for ourselves. I think I'll go with Pema. Yeah, same.
Fantastic. So there's no consultation process,
right?
Let alone consent. Yeah. So wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you, Doris. Please, can you please go ahead and share your points?
I agree with both sisters, and it is also because of the extractive industries that are mostly happening in indigenous territories and lands, with like what Anima said. I think that it is without the free, prior, and informed consent of indigenous peoples, and none of their participation.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you very much for your inputs. Indeed, indigenous peoples have to participate in the UN Foreign Business and Human Rights because of what you all have articulated. But at the same time, you also need to take note, in our countries, where do you see the most resources? Where do you see the most important, pristine forests? Where do you find gold and oil and natural gas?
Indigenous territory.
Yes, it is not by accident that the most important natural resources in our countries are in our indigenous territories. Why?
Because indigenous people have been thinking about sustainability in a non-massive extractive industries.
Yes, precisely. Yeah. Because indigenous peoples, for time immemorial, for thousands of years, have been the steward of the biodiversity, of conservation, of land and natural resources and territories, even before the formation of modern state. Take note of that. Now, in the name of development, governments are now giving concession to private companies to come and exploit these natural resources, where they are mainly in indigenous territories. They said 80% of the world biodiversity are in indigenous territories. Do you understand what that means? It means that when we talk about the global biological resources, whether this is plants and animals, they are mainly in indigenous territories, because indigenous peoples have been protecting these territories for many, many years. So now there's a clash. our governments, our national governments, in the name of national development, now they want to have access to those territories that are in the protection of indigenous territories, indigenous peoples. Now, in countries where we have national laws, they cannot easily do that, because in many parts of the world where indigenous peoples have been recognized as such, and you will have a national law. Like in the Philippines, we have IPRA, the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, since 1997. In Nepal, you have a constitution that recognizes who are indigenous peoples or not, and you have the right to land. I know that in Kenya, you have communities like the Pokot and the Sengwer, and the Rowis, our jurisprudence in the African Court of Human Rights. They have recognized that your people, you have the right to land already. But even in those countries where we have national laws, like in the Philippines, you know what? Implementation is the biggest issue. And sometimes the only way for us to push for the implementation of these national laws and policies is to come to the UN, is to participate in these forums and processes. Why? Because at the national level, with the government, we are like this. You see my palm? This is the government. Indigenous peoples were here. We're very small. You see the gap? So to confront our own government in our own countries, that's a huge challenge. But you know where the best place to confront your government? Come in Geneva. Why do you want, why in Geneva? Because once you are in the international community, you are in the same room with your government. You are facing your government. And I can tell you, when you come to Geneva, your government, and this is what I've seen, I've been in the UN for 18 years, your government will probably treat you better, would listen to you better than when you are in your country. Because once you are in the international community, everybody, the world is listening, is looking at you and your government. And there is not a single government in the world that wants to be, how do you call that term? They don't want to be shamed publicly in the international community. Because in the international community, you know what is most important for a government? It's their image. They have to protect a certain image. And that is your weapon. To use that, to come to the international community and use that as an advocacy strategy. And we have many, many existing national organizations that have capitalized on this. You have TEBTEBA, you have AIPP, you have IPAC, you have CHIRAPAC. Many of your organizations, they have come to Geneva and New York to use this mechanism. So when you decide to come, don't forget about the fund, because the fund is one of the only few, in fact, it's the only one that we have at the moment that provide financial support for indigenous peoples without distinction, whether you are coming from developed or developing country. Any indigenous women and men can actually access to the fund. One of the challenges of many funding sources in many parts of the world, they would put only those who are coming from developing country can apply. And guess what? You think the indigenous peoples in Canada and US, New Zealand, or Australia doesn't have the same challenges that we have. Those who are coming from the Philippines or Indonesia, I can tell you, some of the indigenous peoples in developed country, they are in a worse situation or condition than indigenous peoples who are in developing country. Even worse, discrimination sometimes in developed country is even worse. At least in our own countries, indigenous peoples, we are able to use our language. We have our land. We have a territory. We are recognized. In some developed countries, yes, they are recognized, but they're living in reservation. Have you heard about that? They are living in reservation. I'll stop here. Do you have a question at this point? Is there anything that you want to clarify? Jonery raises a very good point. Donde habitan los pueblos indígenas, porque los pueblos indígenas protegen la naturaleza. Claro, sí. That's the reason why you need to be present and actively participating in the UN Foreign Business and Human Rights, okay? Any question at this point? Is it clear? Can I have a hand? Can you show me a sign that it's clear, or maybe you are more confused?
There's a question in chat, Moss.
Yes, I'm going there now. Elizabeth, sí. Vamos por ahí ahora. Okay. Oh, so this is how it works, okay? So in the fund, we have a board of trustees that review your application when you apply for the fund, and I would respond very soon to the question of Elizabeth, okay? And the board of trustees, I have mentioned, they are independent experts. They don't represent their country where they come from, but they represent their own selves, because they are expert in their own selves, okay? So at the moment, we have 5 members of the board. So what happened is that when we receive application, it's the secretariat, it's me and my other colleagues who works in the office, who have the initial review of your application. We look at your application based on certain criteria, and then if your application is fine, we then look at who among, because of course, all of you, when you apply, I mean, by the end of the day, it's also a competition. So we look at, for example, when there is application to participate in CEDAW, we look at all the application, we review, and once we establish that all of you are admissible, that's the first thing we do. Admissible, then we look at the details of your application. And I will tell you now the criteria, okay? And then once we have the short list of candidate, then we send it to the board of trustees. Okay, so these are the current board members. We have Diel Moshire Mwenge, who is a pygmy from Batwa, from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Sorry. We have Deb Sumar Kutsunuwar. So those of you who are from Nepal, you probably know Deb. We have Tukuminkwak Olsen. So Tuku is from Greenland. So she looks after all the candidates from the Arctic region. We have Marjolaine Etienne from Canada, who looks after North America and the Pacific. And then we have Pablo Mies from Belize, who look after the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. Okay, so these are the board members, and they are independent experts on their own. As I had mentioned to you, the fund, in terms of contribution at the moment, although we also receive contribution from individuals, from foundation, and including, other source of income. But at the moment, we are pretty much being funded by government. So we have Australia, Chile, Estonia, Finland, Canada, Mexico, Norway, Peru, Philippines. They started to contribute last year. In New Zealand, they started to contribute this year. I should tell you that in Asia, Philippines is the only country that is providing support to the fund at the moment. In Africa, we don't have any country that is providing support to the fund. So those of you who are coming from those part of the world, if you have the opportunity to talk or discuss with your government representative, if they're asking, how can we provide support to indigenous peoples, you can encourage them to provide support to the fund. Okay. This is the last. No, this is not the last. This is in 2020 because we couldn't bring people to participate in many meetings during the pandemic. But this is just an example to give you how many grants we are providing on an annual basis. So on an annual basis, we are providing support to about, I would say, 100 to 120 indigenous representatives. And last year, we provided support to 126 indigenous representatives. I have here the exact. Yeah. And this last year, we had 68 women, indigenous women, 57 men, and 1 trans woman. And these representatives, they're coming from 47 countries globally. So that's the number of grantees that we provided support. Since 1985, we have provided support to over 3,000 indigenous delegates from over 90 countries. And as I told you, these are the key main results of the fund's contribution: the adoption of the UN Declaration, the establishment of the Permanent Forum, the implementation or the organization of the 2014 World Conference on Indigenous Peoples. And these are some examples of the impact of the fund. We provided support in the review of the mandate of the expert mechanism and the rights of indigenous peoples. And one of the important outcome of this is that MRIP now have one important amendments of its mandate. It's called country engagement. So thanks to the fund, we were able to provide indigenous peoples inputs into that. These are very quite, self-explanatory impact of the fund. By the way, we provide a lot of training and capacity building. So what I'm doing now with you is a part of our contribution to that. But I should also tell you that starting in 2 weeks' time, we are going to have a series of training until December. We are organizing 12 online trainings on the different UN mechanisms and bodies and instruments on indigenous peoples. And you are most welcome, and I would encourage you actually to participate in those online trainings. There will be interpretation in English, French, Spanish, and Russian. And once I finish this session, I will be sharing to you the training calendar so you can put in your calendar. Just to show you, I'd like to play a short video. Before I will finish my session. Oops. While I'm trying to deal with this video, do you have any question at this point? I'll just show you one of this short video.
The video is not visible on the screen.
30 años para los pueblos indígenas asistiendo y accediendo a los organismos de Naciones Unidas es algo que no se podría contar por años, sino por lo que se
For
ha
30 years, Indigenous people have been participating in spaces at the United Nations, which couldn't have happened if it wasn't for the Voluntary Fund for Indigenous Peoples. This fund helps Indigenous peoples to participate in various treaty bodies, and it's important for Indigenous peoples to participate because the states need to participate.
Pressure for states to engage with Indigenous peoples at the national level.
Avant, on avait peur de s'engager ou de dénoncer quand il y a des violations, mais quand on est ici, on tire beaucoup de leçons de la part des autres, de la part des expériences des autres. Et pour dire que même chez moi, nous avons des représentants au sein des institutions.
Are you able to see the video?
No, Mos.
Oh, no.
We can just see your presentation. I think you forgot to change.
Oh, sorry, sorry.
The viewing screen.
Wait. Yes, sorry. How do you?
You can stop sharing this, yeah, and then I'll share the screen that's showing the video.
Yes, please, sorry.
One of the really important advantages of the Voluntary Fund is that regardless of what country you come from or what's considered a developed or non-developed country, all applications are considered equally.
Avoir une plateforme politique de négociation entre les États et les communautés autochtones. Je pense que c'est le Fonds volontaire qui nous a donné cette chance et c'est vraiment très génial. Je souhaite que ça continue toujours. Merci.
This is not only a travel grant. This is a grant that gives opportunity to Indigenous women and men from remote communities to really develop their capacity, to really link, to really exchange experiences and learn how to solve their problems, the local, national, and international.
Oops. Gosh, did you see anything or no?
No, you need to share the screen that's displaying the video. Yeah, the same way you are sharing the other one.
Ooh, okay, wait a minute. How do we do this? I think, okay, wait. Sorry about this, guys. We still have time, no?
Yes.
I will copy that. I'm gonna go to Mimeo. I thought it will come. automatically. So of course it's not. Okay. So it's like this. Can you see it now?
Yes.
It's okay now?
Yeah, now we can see.
Okay.
Años para todos los indígenas asistiendo y accediendo a los organismos de Naciones Unidas es algo que no se podría contar por años, sino por lo que se ha conseguido gracias al Fondo Voluntario de Apoyo a los Pueblos Indígenas de Naciones Unidas. Toma una importancia vital el financiamiento del Fondo Voluntario de Naciones Unidas a los pueblos indígenas, a la participación en los mecanismos de tratados, por el hecho de que, si bien es cierto, es una especialización en los temas, es necesario que los pueblos indígenas empiecen a manejar los órganos de tratados. Son de cumplimiento obligatorio de los estados que han ratificado.
Consistent participation of indigenous peoples at the global level has generated more pressure for states to engage with indigenous peoples at the national level.
Avant, on avait peur de s'engager ou de dénoncer quand il y a des violations, mais quand on est ici, on tire beaucoup de leçons de la part des autres, de la part des expériences des autres. Et pour dire que même chez moi, nous avons des représentants au sein des institutions.
One of the really important advantages of the voluntary fund is that regardless of what country you come from, or what's considered a developed or non-developed country, all applications are considered equally.
Avoir une plateforme politique de négociation entre les États et les communautés autochtones, je pense que c'est le Fonds volontaire qui nous a donné cette chance et c'est vraiment très génial. Je souhaite que ça continue toujours. Merci.
This is not only a travel grant. This is a grant that gives opportunity to indigenous women and men from remote communities to really develop their capacity, to really link, to really exchange experiences and learn how to solve their problems, the local, national, and international.
Okay. Okay, what I'm going to share to you now is where to find information about the involuntary fund, yeah? So if you haven't seen our website, this is the website of the fund. So basically, you Google UN Voluntary Fund for Indigenous People. I will also put that in our chat so you can immediately see that. Now, these things, the one on the left side, I have explained that to you already. But what's most important for you now to learn is where to apply. Okay? But maybe before you do that, we can have a look quickly at the criteria of selection. So, and I would encourage you to look at this page, and this is available in 4 languages. You can see information as well in Espanol. See, aquí, if you want. And you can also see it in French, okay? So let's go back to English. No, where is the English now? This one, okay. What? So in terms of criteria, Elizabeth asked before. So basically, these are the key criteria. Let's look at the MRIP. So basically, all participants has to be considered by the Board of Trustees. So we will have to review. As I have mentioned to you, the secretary will review, and then we send the shortlist to the board to decide who will get the fund. And of course, the most important criteria is that we would select the best people who can contribute to a deeper knowledge of the mechanism or bodies that you are applying for. So if you are applying to participate at the treaty bodies, you have to show to us that you know how this mechanism works. It means that for treaty bodies, you should have at least drafted a shadow report, or that you have participated in at least already one of the most important mechanisms of the UNs. It could be the permanent forum, it could be the expert mechanism, or it could be the UN Forum Business and Human Rights, or at the climate change process. So see, so we only take application on an individual basis. So we don't take application from an organization as an organization, okay? It's only in a very exceptional cases that beneficiaries could be replaced by another one from the same organization, but that's not very common. No? Second, that the representative of the organization should be an indigenous person. We won't take into consideration an application that does not include a letter of recommendation signed by the executive of the organization. We can only receive application from 2 individuals per organization. And most importantly, that you can submit application in either English, French, or Spanish. These are the working languages of the Secretariat. So here it says, the board selects both representative of the permanent forum and expert mechanism, especially those who have already participated either in one or the other, because we would like you to build an expertise on a certain mechanism. So when you apply for the permanent forum, because normally when we review application or even when we make a call for application, we always put the application together for the expert mechanism or for the permanent forum. And that is why here you have an opportunity or 2 possibilities. You could be considered for the permanent forum, or you could be considered both for the permanent forum and the expert mechanism. As I mentioned before here, the board strongly encourages application from Indigenous women, youth, and Indigenous persons with disabilities. Now, recently, for the past 5 years, we also added here, we strongly encourage the application from Indigenous peoples who also considers themselves belonging to LGBTIQ communities, okay? We give more priority to Indigenous peoples who are living in their country or community or territory than those who are living abroad. This is very important. The board will not consider application from Indigenous representative of those who have not submitted the evaluation forms. So make sure that when you are given the fund, there are 2 types of evaluation. There is a post-participation evaluation. When you participate, you make sure that you fill up the form before you go home. At the end of the year, the board sent another evaluation form to your organization to tell us how you, as a representative of the organization, have used your grant when you participated in New York, in Geneva, or anywhere else in the world. So basically, the organization is to tell us the impact of your participation. Okay? Is it clear? Now, other information that you need?
Could you please tell me about the Indigenous Fellowship Program and how can we apply?
Oh, the Indigenous Fellowship Program, yes. Okay, I will take note of that. The Indigenous Fellowship Program, I'll get back to you because I'm also the coordinator to that. But before I'll do that, I just quickly want you to know where to find the application, okay? Here. We currently have application for all UN meetings that is taking place. Oh, what's this? Oh, it's not yet in here. Oh, this is an old one, I'm sorry. But we do have a Facebook page. Let me just check if I can do that. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, but I will try to give you an update on this because it looks like they're still talking about 2022 application. But what I would like you to do is I would really like you to go to our Facebook page of the forum. Let's see if I can show it to you. Where is it? Oh, this is so complicated. Yeah. So if you wanted to learn more about the current call for application, we do have an ongoing call for application now. There is a call for application for all the meetings that is taking place from July, August, and September, I think, or June, July, August, September. And that includes the UN Climate Change meeting in Bonn in June. There is the Human Rights Council in June, and all the treaty bodies from CEDAW to CRC that is taking place between May, June, July. So if you want, you can go to our UN Voluntary Fund Facebook page, and all the applications are in our page, okay? Now, if you wanted to learn more about the Indigenous Fellowship Program, very quickly, so you can also find it on OHHR Indigenous Fellowship Program. It's this one. So the Indigenous Fellowship Program is here. We don't have a call for application for this year because we already selected our fellows in 2020, but unfortunately they were unable to join. So we will be bringing the same people to come for the fellowship program for 2023. But in July, towards the mid-year, we will make a call for application for 2024. We are currently have 4 linguistic groups: English, French, Spanish, and Russian. And you can, of course, participate in any of those linguistic groups. And then afterwards, where is it? And then most recently, we are going to make a launch of our new Indigenous Fellowship Program. And it's called the Portuguese-speaking Fellowship Program. It's going to be the first Indigenous training program for the Portuguese-speaking world. We are launching it this June. So those of you who are coming from Brazil or you have friends from Brazil, please don't hesitate to apply or share the information about it. We will be sharing it to Joy or to our colleagues in FIMI. So we will ensure that we have Indigenous women applying for the program. So if you're interested in the fellowship program, this is a very quick update. For 2023, the fellows are already selected, but definitely for 2024, we will have a call for application around July of this year. So yeah, I'll stop here. I hope that I gave credit to your expectation, but please don't hesitate to get in touch with me if you have any question. I will be, for the next session on treaty bodies, I will be sending your assignment to Joy so that then you can prepare yourself. I would really like you, and I would encourage you to do that. And I'm not just telling you now for my session, but for the other sessions, that before the session begins or start, I would really like you to read on the session, prepare good questions, and really engage your speaker. All right. And please don't be shy. Don't hesitate. Ask questions as much as you can, because that's the only way for you to clarify things that you don't understand. Okay. So thank you once again. I don't know if you still have time. I still have some time. If you have anything to ask, please, I can stay for a couple of minutes, but I don't know, Joy, Winnie, do you still have time for participants to ask questions, or the next session is already upcoming?
No, there's still time. So if there's anyone who has a question or a comment or something they need
Yes,
to
please.
clarify, please go ahead and do so. We still have time to answer some of your questions.
Maybe if you don't have a question at this point, I'll just give you some tips for the application for the fund. Okay.
Sure.
First tip to you: when you apply ahead of time. Ahead of time, because if we see that there's a lot of application, you see there are resources allocated per session. The board decides how many Indigenous representatives will be selected for a specific meeting. But when we see, or if we observe that there is a strong interest for Indigenous people, let's say, to participate in the UPR, and we only put five slots or 5 delegates, and we receive 50 applications, then we will have to take that into consideration, that we need to increase the budget for the UPR. So please, if you see an application on the fund, apply as soon as possible, okay? Second, you see when you apply, I'll show you. In the fund, normally you can now apply to the fund online, okay? Let me just open one of the application, very recent. So here. Let's say this one, okay? I don't know if it, okay. So this is the application for the permanent forum. You see, if you are interested at the permanent forum, normally the application is almost 6 months in advance. Why 6 months? Because we have so many applications. I should tell you, just for the permanent forum and the expert mechanism, we normally receive about 2,000 applications. 2,000. And guess how many slots we have? 20. Meaning that you are not going to compete. In fact, the way the competition is within your own region. Within your own region. Because the board, the way they allocate the slot is they give number of slot or grants per region. Now, we also take into account that Asia and Africa is where you have the most number of Indigenous people. So let's say if there is 40 slots for the permanent forum, the way the board divides is that for that 40, they will divide it into seven socio-cultural regions of the world. So 40 divided by 7, so that would be 5 per region. And then you have extra 5, because 5 times 7 is 35, so we have 40. The remaining 5, we will then distribute that to the regions where we have the most number of Indigenous people. So first Asia, Africa, Latin America. Then you go to Pacific, you go to Arctic, that way. So for example, if we prioritize Asia and Africa this year, next year we rotate. We have to give that slot, the additional slot, to Latin America and the Caribbean, to the Pacific, or to the Arctic. So that's how it works, okay? Oh, you see, I cannot even open the application now. So I'll stop the sharing there. My third comment or advice to you is when you apply, you really try to articulate why you are applying for this meeting. Link your interest to what you are doing within the organization or a specific issue within your community. So let's say you wanted to, you are interested to attend the session on CEDAW, and you applied. But before you apply, you have to tell us I am very keen to participate in CEDAW because I have been trained by FIMI on CEDAW, specifically on the General Recommendation 39. My organization is currently developing a training manual or a training tool to promote this General Recommendation 39. My country, Guatemala, is going to be reviewed in 2 years' time. Or my country, Namibia, is going to be reviewed in 6 months' time. My organization is currently preparing a shadow report to CEDAW. I would really like to participate because I know that my participation in 6 months or in 2 years, there is an impact, not only to me, but to my organization. That's how you articulate your interests. It's the same when you're applying for a job. It's the same here because you are competing with a very limited resources. So the boards, the way they decide is, of course, they would like to maximize this kind of opportunity. Now, third, internal tips to you. When you apply, you should not only mentioning your interest, but you need to articulate what are the actions that you want to do once you are here. See, participation is not enough. These are several of my recommendations to you. You can mention in your application, if I am selected to participate at the permanent forum, I would like to deliver 3 statements. 1, on self-determination. 2, on the rights of Indigenous women and children. 3, on transnational companies. Those are measurable. When I see numbers in application, I get excited because I know that you put some thought in your application. Second, you know, Indigenous rights advocacy work, there are 2 things. One is formal. You participate, you engage in the process, but the most important sometimes is the informal process. It's the things that you do outside of the meeting room. So what can you put in your application? Tell us, Morris, I would like to participate in the forum because I also would like to organize 2 side events. One is on the impact of climate change on Indigenous women. Second, I would like to organize an event on the International Year of Indigenous Languages. And I'm going to organize this side event in collaboration with my sister organization in Panama or my sister organization in Greenland. We love to see those collaborations. We love to see those actions, okay? Some people, you know what they do, which I really hate, is they just cut and paste. Really, come on, cut and paste. That's not the quality of work that we would like to see, okay? Third, even before applying and submitting your application, start planning. Advocacy, if CEDAW is coming in 6 months and you start planning only in 3 months' time, you're late. You really have to have an advocacy schedule. So now, you know that the permanent forum is coming in April. You should have already planned 6 months ago or 3 months ago. For example, some of the things that you can put in your application. I would like to attend the permanent forum or the expert mechanism because my government, when my country was reviewed by the UPR, we received 6 specific recommendations on Indigenous women by Nepal, by the Philippines, by Canada, by Norway, by Denmark. I would like to follow up on those governments. Those are tangible actions that you can tell us that you really wanted to work while you are in those meetings. You see, you might be attending a specific training or a specific forum like the permanent forum and the expert mechanism, but in between sessions, you can do so many things. You can follow up a recommendation of the treaty bodies Well, you are in the forum. I can tell you, the government that you are meeting in the session of the treaty bodies, when your country is being reviewed, is the same government that is sitting in the session of the Human Rights Council. It's the same representative of the government that is sitting in the session of the expert mechanism. Why? Because the way government is structured in your permanent mission, in your embassies, we don't call them embassies. Embassies is your representation of your government at the capital. But once they are in Geneva or in New York, they're called permanent mission. So every single one of you, your country, you have a permanent mission to the UN. The people who work at the permanent mission, of course, are diplomats. Now, this diplomat, they are arranged based on their expertise and interests. And normally, the person who works on human rights is the same person who is working on women's rights. It's the same person who works on indigenous people's rights. Now, you just need to get to know this person. Once you know this person, you can lobby, you can follow up a lot of work alone in one single meeting. So maximize that. So when you apply for the permanent forum, or when you apply for MRIP, or when you apply for the Human Rights Council or the UN Forum Business and Human Rights, any of the meetings that the forum or the fund is providing support, you can do advocacy work in many other issues. And then finally, the most important, tell us, what are you going to do after you participate in the meeting that you are interested to participate? So let's say you wanted to go to the permanent forum. So then what? After the forum, what are you going to do? These are some of the things that I can give you an example. When I go back, I would like to organize a training to my organization, to my community, to share my experience, to share the specific recommendation from the forum, to share. I mean, you can even organize, for example, a press conference or a press release. After my participation to the treaty bodies, I would like to translate the specific recommendation on indigenous peoples in indigenous languages. That kind of thing, that kind of actions we would like to see, right? So again, I would repeat, when you apply for the fund, make sure that you apply in advance, okay? Most people, they apply at the last minute. I can tell you, sometimes the system collapses because there will be like 2,000 of you applying and our system cannot cope. And can you imagine you missed your opportunity because you're applying late? Take note that the fund always make a call for application 3 months in advance. And that is what I'm telling you now. And that's why I wanted to do this session to you, so that you know that there is an ongoing call for application for all the meetings that is taking place in May, June, July. Apply now. Apply in advance. The deadline, I think, is 15th of March or 10th of March. I can't remember. So you still have time to apply. Second, please tell us why you need to be a grantee in a measurable manner, specific manner. Try to show that you wanted to participate in the formal happenings, but most importantly, in the informal. So there are many activities that you can do in the informal activities: side events, follow up with member state, meeting with UN officials, meeting with the desk officer of your country if you're coming to Geneva, meeting with other networks. You could mention that we have a consultation meeting with FIMI. For those who are coming from Asia, for those who are coming from Africa, we would like to see those kind of initiatives. Okay? But most importantly, tell us, what are your plans within the next 6 months when you come back to your organization or your community? So those are my tips. And I can tell you, it would change your application completely. And if you are not selected on the first time, Don't be discouraged. I can tell you some people are applying 4 times. It's just the way it is. As I was telling you, the problem sometimes is that you might be the most qualified now, but it could be that one of your member organization has applied last year. And unfortunately, we cannot keep supporting, of course, the same people from the same organization or the same network. As I was mentioning to you, we would like to ensure that the fund equalizes opportunities for everybody. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Morsi. I don't know if there's someone else or if there's someone who has a question, but
yes,
just as they think about their question or they type their question, Morsi,
yes.
I'd like for you to possibly mention what happens when you do get the voluntary fund and you arrive in whichever country that you arrive in and do not adhere to, the rules, or you don't do what you were supposed to do as a grantee.
As a grantee,
what happens to you and what happens to your organization when that happens.
Winnie, thank you so much for raising that, because that's a very important aspect of being a fund. You see, when you are selected as a grantee of the fund, basically you have taken the space of another Indigenous woman. And imagine if you don't do your job, or if you unfortunately you won't be able to, to completely and effectively or fully participate, then that's a lost opportunity. Okay. So what happens when you don't follow the regulations, because you are supposed to participate 100% in the fund? You see, there is an evaluation of the fund when you participate. And when you participate, there is always, even before joining the meeting, we have a training. We call it preparatory training. So if you are selected, please, I would encourage you, make sure that you participate in those preparatory training, because those preparatory training are crucial. Those are technical meetings. We will explain to you how to register, how to apply for visa, how to go to your hotel, how to go to the meeting venue and all that. That's also when you get to know all the other grantees coming from different regions. So you get to know all of them. Second, we also provide training on the body that you are participating. So that's an additional technical support that we provide. So if you are selected to go to the permanent forum, for example, for 2023, we have our substantive meeting on the 17th of March. And normally this training is about 3 hours. We ask normally experts who have, recognized experts who have participated. We have always 2 or 3 trainers. One is from the secretariat of that mechanism. So if you are going to the permanent forum, during our training, we will have somebody from the secretariat to tell you the in and out of that mechanism, the agenda, the registration, all that, how to submit online intervention, how to organize side event. The other one is a training that is coming from an organization, an Indigenous organization, to give you life of that mechanism, how Indigenous peoples access or participate in those mechanisms, and how you as an Indigenous representative could best maximize your participation. Afterwards, the day before the training, we create a WhatsApp group for coordination purposes. There are some last-minute communication and all that. Some people sometimes, miss their flight, and sometimes they felt that once they missed their flight, They can't participate anymore. But you see, if you miss the technical meeting, sometimes, you know, the UN, being a grantee of the UN, you are entitled. In fact, if you miss your flight, we can change your flight within 24 hours. But you have to tell us immediately so that we can immediately change or put you in the next flight. Okay? When you fly as a grantee, make sure that you keep the boarding pass of your flight, because that is an evidence that you participated. Don't lose that, because if you lose that, I can tell you, you're gonna have a problem with our finance reporting system later on. So keep those boarding passes. Once you are in the meeting, we take attendance on a daily basis. You meet with the secretariat, we take your attendance. We actually ask, even if you are organizing side event, if you are planning to deliver a statement, because we also report those things in our narrative report to the board. And then during the session, I mean, the meeting of the UN is between 10 to 1, 3 to 6. Out of that time, you're quite free. Okay, so make sure that the allocated time, the UN official meeting time, 3 to 6, 10 to 1, you are in the session. Now, in case you won't make it, just tell the secretariat, saying, Morris, I'm sorry, but you know, I won't be able to come to this session, because give a good justification, because I'm organizing a side event, or I have a follow-up meeting with a member state. Yeah, that kind of thing. Now, the thing that we don't want you to do is to just disappear without a trace. Oh, I can tell you it happens. Yes, we have grantees in the fund. They received the ticket. They actually arrived in Geneva and they never showed up. And then after 2 months, I bumped them in Geneva, and now they live in Geneva. Now, I can tell you, of course, it happens. And you know, people have different expectation, you know, we have different needs, but it does make a bad impression of your organization and your people. Because then you are, you know, when you become a grantee of the fund, or when you become a fellow, you are a representative of your people. Not only that, you are representing your country, and you are representing your region. You see, so there's quite a big responsibility that you have. So again, I would repeat, when you are given that opportunity, I can tell you it's an incredible opportunity, but it comes with a great responsibility. So I really hope that you will take advantage of that opportunity. Don't disappear. Because, you know, we would have problem as well with the Swiss government. You see, it's not just about, you know, it's not just about you disappearing, but you see, we also report if we have grantees or fellows disappearing. Maybe next time the Swiss wouldn't allow us anymore to organize this kind of program, because then the Swiss government would think that, oh, these people are taking advantage of this. So then they would become very strict in giving visas to indigenous people. So you see, those things sometimes, you know, they complicate things. Yeah. But of course, you know, I mean, any person or individual, we know that, you know, I mean, we don't have many cases, but we do have special cases already. So I'm telling you this because it happens. Yeah. And then if you don't submit your evaluation after your participation, or your organization doesn't submit the evaluation towards the end of the year, then your organization will be blacklisted for the next 3 years. That's how it happens. Okay. Any other question? Yes, there's a question of, do you have a list of those who have in the past? Yes, we used to do that, Anima. But you see, unfortunately, I should tell you, reprisal or threat to indigenous representative has become very, I think it's the biggest challenge that we have now in the UN, and this is also a precaution to you. You see, when you become a grantee of the UN, or when you come as a fellow, or in any other meetings, I should tell you that there is a possibility that you are putting yourself in a spotlight, or that you are putting yourself at risk. Please take note of this. When you speak in the UN, at the expert mechanism, at the permanent forum, it's a public space. Your government will be in the same meeting room as you are. For those of you, and I could see, and this is my advice to you, for those of you who are coming from governments who are very repressive, who, how do I put it? Repressive is already a very strong word. There are governments who, in as much as they want to silence their people because they believe that the international community is their turf. It's their territory. They don't like other people taking that space. But no, take note of this, my dear. The Charter of the UN, the Constitution of the UN, right from the very beginning, it says, we call it the preamble of the UN. Take note of this. It says, we, the peoples. It didn't say, we, the government. So don't be scared of taking that space. It was created for you. But be very cautious at the same time. Because we have had cases, both our fellows and our grantees, while they are in Geneva, they can't go home. Because the government have threatened them that if they go home, they cannot secure their security. So those are the things that you also need to take note. It's a part of your responsibility when you become a human rights defender. And I should tell you, and of course you know this, indigenous women are much prone to threat than indigenous men. And that is why, this issue of intersectionality of human rights, of course, we are all free and equal. Indigenous men and women are equal. But indigenous women are much, much more prone to that. And once you are threatened, it's your family that is threatened, it's your community that is threatened, it's your organization that is threatened. So that when we talk about threats of reprisal and all that, we are not just talking about the individual. When we talk about indigenous rights, it's actually a threat to the whole community. That's the collective aspect of indigenous people's rights. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Thank you so much, Mos, for that very useful information. And I hope the sisters will take advantage of the information and be able to apply through the voluntary fund. Just a quick clarification: is the application to attend the permanent forum now, like this year's permanent forum, still open?
No, it's not open. It's already closed, and the selected grantees have been informed. As I have mentioned, the permanent forum and the expert mechanism, these two mechanisms, they're a bit of special animal. They are promoted, or the call for application is 6 months in advance because we have so many applications. So normally, and the board does the selection in December during their annual board meeting. The rest of the other call for application, it's distributed in April, June, and I think September. That's the cycle of application. So this is how it works. So all UN meetings that is taking place from January, February, and March, the call for application, the time when you are asked to apply, is 3 months in advance. Meaning, normally we do the call in either mid-November or early December. But normally it's mid-November. Now, for all the meetings, so it's basically, it's by, we call it semester, or no? First, second, quarterly, per quarter, okay? So every 3 months, there is a call for application. So the first quarter is January, February, and March. The second quarter is April, May, and June. So now, all the meetings that is taking place in April, May, and June, we did the call in January or February. Now, all the meeting that is taking place in June, July, August, September, then it's the second quarter. All the meetings that is taking place on the fourth quarter, which is October, November, December, the call will take place on the third quarter. So every 3 months, it's like that.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's important so that the sisters can also take note on when to look, to keep looking at the website so that they know what's the call for application and which sessions are there to see if you're eligible. So please, sisters, please keep checking the OHCHR website to see which sessions are coming up and which ones you can apply to attend.
Exactly. Maybe just maybe a last point from my side. When it comes to meetings as well, you know, the meetings happens in different parts of the world, yeah? And sometimes for you, it's important because it comes with issues. The biggest challenge that we have for Indigenous people is visa. You know, I went through this and I hate it. I can tell you it's the most dehumanizing experience in my life. If ever I don't want to go there anymore because really it's unfair. So the main meetings that we provide support in Geneva is the expert mechanism. Take note, it happens in July. Okay, July is a very good time to be in Geneva. It's summertime. As opposed to, for example, when you come in October, November, for many Indigenous people, Geneva is not the most encouraging time to be during winter. For those of you who are coming from Africa, from Asia, from the Pacific, it's dark, it's gray, it's lonely, it's cold. But you're not coming there anyway for those reasons. But it does changes, you know, your capacity to adapt to an environment. Because I have seen some people, you know, here they come here and they don't get out, and I feel bad about that. Now, the treaty bodies, all of them are in Geneva. So take note of that. Now, the treaty bodies, every single month, there is a meeting in the treaty bodies. Your first assignment is to find out when is your country is going to be reviewed by the treaty bodies. The UPR, the Universal Periodic Review, it's every 3 months. The session in March of the Human Rights Council, there's a session in June, and there's a session in October, November. So you have 3 possibilities to apply for the UPR. Treaty bodies, almost every single month. MRIP, once every year in July. All those meetings are in Geneva. For the Human Rights Council, like the UPR, the Human Rights Council meet 3 times a year. March, June, and September. The most important session on the Human Rights Council is the September session. Why? Because that's when the time the Human Rights Council review the report provided by the UN mechanism specific to Indigenous people. That's when MRIP reports to the Human Rights Council. That's when the Special Rapporteur reports to the Human Rights Council. Now, if you did not manage to participate in MRIP, this is your second chance to provide inputs into the MRIP work, whether these are studies or country engagement. You can come to the Human Rights Council. There is a half-day, how do you call it? Interactive dialogue. There is a interactive dialogue, but basically they're not interactive at all, I can tell you. So don't put too much hope in that. They're mainly monologue. They are not very interactive. So government just saying thank you to each other, and and they have a very limited space for indigenous people. I think sometimes they will only give 5 slots for indigenous people. Another challenge to that, and this is one thing that you need to learn how to network. That's very important. You see, when you come to these spaces, there are mafia. There is mafia of big international NGOs in Geneva. And when you talk about mafia, there are different types of NGOs. The biggest mafia are these NGOs that have ECOSOC status. When your organization have an ECOSOC status, you can pretty much participate in all the meetings of the UN. And you will be on the top of the list when you want to speak, because you have this ECOSOC status. It means that your organization has been accredited by the Economic and Social Council of the UN, that you have the mandate of your organization is very close to the mandate of the ECOSOC, which is to promote basically economic, social, and cultural rights. And this is my advice to you. If your organization doesn't have an ECOSOC status, start applying for that. Really, I would encourage every single indigenous organization to apply for an ECOSOC status, because you can only participate in the UPR and in the Human Rights Council if you have an ECOSOC status. If you don't, you can't participate. You see? Now, the only way for you to circumvent that, to go away with that, is to network with those big mafia organizations to take you in their list, to accredit you. But then you know what happened? Then they will take ownership of your speech. You see, you are no longer Irene Nyenye from Kenya, who is a Maasai. No, you will be, for example, if you are accredited by the World Council of Churches, then your name will be under the World Council of Churches, not anymore with Naraman Women's Organization or with Doris, for example. Oh yeah, but I think Tebtaba have an ECOSOC status. You see, this is one thing that you also need to find out. Find out who among indigenous organizations have an ECOSOC status. At least you will be under an umbrella of an indigenous organization. Okay? Now, what else? So try to find out. You also need to be you need to know also the duration of the meeting. Some meetings are very, very long. Some meetings are very, very short. The longest meeting of the UN is the Permanent Forum. Full 2 weeks, you are in New York. 2 weeks. Sometimes it's longer, because now there is a global caucus, which is the weekend before. Now, if you're a grantee, even longer, because we normally provide training, in-person training, even before the caucus. So for example, this year, all our grantees, we are going to organize an in-person training in collaboration with Niatero on the Thursday and the Friday before the global caucus. Now it's confirmed. I should tell you, the caucus is happening this year. It's on Saturday and Sunday. So basically that's the 15th and the 16th of April. Okay, very long. The UPR is very short. It's normally about, because it's normally about 3-5 days, 1 week. You can go to participate during the review of your country and the adoption of the recommendation of your country. After that, it's finished. MRIP is 1 week in Geneva. The Human Rights Council, it's even shorter. It's 3 days, because the agenda on indigenous people is basically half a day. Okay, sometimes it could be longer, depending on how busy the Human Rights Council. So we give you at least 2 days as an extra to do some advocacy, additional advocacy work. The Forum on Business and Human Rights is even shorter. It's 2 days. Is it? I'm sorry. I don't want to give you wrong information. Is it 2 days?
Sorry.
The Forum on Business and Human Rights.
Oh,
I think it's 2 days or 3 days, something like this. Okay, it's short, but it's very intense. Okay, now the longest one is climate change. Climate change, 3 weeks, because the climate change negotiation is 2 weeks, and indigenous peoples meet 1 week before the negotiation, because that is the meeting of the local communities and indigenous peoples platform. Okay, so when you apply, make sure that you have that time to participate. The least that we don't want to happen is that you are selected and you only show up for half. Okay, so when you apply, take into consideration the location. It's a lot easier to apply for visa for the Swiss. The Swiss government is more friendly than the US. I can tell you that. It is so difficult to apply for a US visa. But there's a good thing about the US as well. They give long-term US visa. Some of them are giving for 5 years or some for 10 years. Okay? Normally our grantees, because they are being provided support from the UN, they normally give them 5 or 10 years. It's very seldom that they give the specific date. Well, yeah, we have seen people who are receiving the same as well. Yeah. The Swiss, they're a bit more friendly. I mean, because the Swiss, they know the work of indigenous peoples in the UN. We've been here for 30 years, so they know us. So, you know, they're more friendly. Sometimes you can get a visa within 3 days. With the US, sometimes you have to wait for 2 years even to make an appointment. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. So, yeah. The climate change, it depends on who hosts the climate change. For this year, it's in Dubai. So it's the United Arab Emirates. Okay. The Forum on Business and Human Rights is in Geneva, so it's the Swiss government. Yeah, so those are internal.
Thank you, Mos, and I'm sure we'll have more questions when you join us again for the other session. And I'll also let you know what other treaty bodies are being covered with any of the guests that will come before you, so that
yes, please.
In case there's any treaty body that is being covered, I'll let you know which ones they are, so that you don't so you don't cover them again. Yeah. So thank you so much, Mos. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing very valuable information on participation of indigenous peoples in these different platforms that are available to us. And I hope, ladies, you've had, and if you have any questions that you need to clarify, please let us know, and we'll share them with Mos and give you responses. Or if you read on something, or on the things that he has already told you to read about, please keep those questions so that you can ask him when he comes back in a few weeks to speak to us on some of the other bodies and how we can engage more in the UN outside of the normal permanent forum and the EBRIP, because that's, I think, the only two that we're always running to participate in. But it's wonderful to be able to know that there's support to apply and to attend these other bodies and be in these other spaces that are also very critical to us as indigenous peoples. So Mos, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. We wish you well with your report. I hope you make it on time, and we look forward to seeing you soon again.
Yeah, well, meaning, thanks to you. Thanks for the invitation. Joy, thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you so
to
much,
all
Mos.
our participants, I really hope that you get some information. My last comment to you, I don't know, let me know if you want me to give at least an introduction to international law, because it would be impossible, even for me. It's very difficult to understand the treaty bodies without at least a basic of that. So maybe what I can do is, before I'll dive into the treaty bodies, I can give you just keywords, so that then, it would lessen the confusion for you. I would be sending, I would call it preparatory reading notes. I will send it to Joy, and I would highly encourage you to read them before our next session, because I'm going to tell you, I'm going to ask you questions. Okay? We agree on that, yeah?
You have been forewarned.
I know I have given already an assignment to one of you, so I don't forget, I can tell you. All right, my dear, thank you so much. Lovely to meet you all. Gracias, muchas gracias a todos. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Morse.
Thank you.
All right, ladies, thank you so much. I think I'll pass this over to Joy for some housekeeping before we can end the session.
Thank you, Winnie. Hi, hello, sisters. I hope that was a very useful session. Morse is always very interested in building the capacities of the global school FEMI. So I hope in the next session we will be more interactive and communicate with him, because really he's really the right person to ask questions, anything related to the different UN mechanisms. So we'll be seeing him just one more time on the 22nd of March, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, on the 22nd of March. So I encourage you to be there in class on that day too, and you can ask your questions, any other pending questions that you might have for Morse from today's session. So before we close, I just have one small announcement. I know that we've started working on the statement, on the regional statements in our Google documents. And I know that the last time we had made this announcement that we will probably be presenting this statement. Just give me 1 minute, I'm just looking at the dates. Yes, so we had mentioned earlier that we will be presenting the statement to the FEMI political team on the 27th of March. We had earlier said that each region will have their statement prepared, read it out, and the FEMI political team will give their inputs on the statements. But I would just like to inform you that we may have to prepone that to the 20th of March. We may have to prepone that because our guest who's supposed to be coming on the 20th of March had actually requested her session to be shifted to the 27th. So given that, her session is also very important, we're considering that date for our expert. So I just want to say, I hope we've started working on the statement, and I hope we will have it ready by the 20th of March for the FEMI political team to come and give their inputs. But this is just, again, this is not confirmed, but I'll confirm the dates with you through the academic advisors. But this is what it looks like right now for our time on the 22nd of March and the 29th of March. So that is all from my end. Okay, Doris, Pema is the owner of the link for the Asia region. Pema, please share it with Doris as well so that she gets access to the link. So that is all from my end. If there's nothing else from the participants, maybe we can close, Winnie.
Yeah, unless there's anything, again, we'll just follow up on your Google Docs to share your thoughts and start to refine the statement within the week. Please let your advisors know when you need assistance. We'll also share previous statements so that you see how it's structured or how they were structured previously. But please remember to constantly go back to the Permanent Forum website to see what the theme is, see what the 6 mandated areas are, so that so that when you're doing when you're structuring the statement, it's in line with the theme and the permanent and the 6 mandated areas. So again, thank you for making it to class today. Please remember to always sign in at least 5 to 10 minutes beforehand, so that we don't have the expert coming to wait for us like we did today. We had to wait for about 10 minutes so that we can have quorum for us to begin. I think it's important for us to be respectful of their time and also respectful of your time, so that we can always have enough time for us to have not only the lessons but also some discussions. Please remember to read on. You already have the calendar, so you know who's coming up next. Please read, find information. The websites or the internet has a lot of information on many of the things that we're already talking about. You can read beforehand so that when you come into class, you already have questions or comments or clarifications that you want to ask the expert. So please, let's be proactive in class. Ask as many questions, give comments. Nothing that you want to ask or you want to say is wrong, because you're entitled to your opinion. You can ask questions. There's nothing that is if you have a doubt, you must ask, so that there's clarification being done. And that's why our experts are here. They're here to help clarify anything or to answer any questions that you have in your that you might have, whether it's in your region or if it's in your community or if it's an international issue that you saw that you want clarification on. Please ask your experts to explain or to answer those questions. So again, thank you so much. I wish you a pleasant week. We'll see you again on Wednesday or Thursday for some people. And I wish you well and see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Winnie. See you.
Bye. Have a good evening or good day.
You too. Bye.